The observation deck of the Galactic Assessment Station hummed with nervous energy. Representatives from 47 different species sat in neat rows, each watching the holographic display that showed a simulated star system under attack. The test was simple in theory. Identify the greatest threat to galactic peace from the scenarios presented. Admiral Zextar of the Krillian Empire leaned forward in the front row, his forearms crossed as he studied the display. Behind him, the insectoid hive queen Vash clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. The crystalline ethereals chimed softly to each other in the second row, their translucent forms shimmering with each note. But, in row 3, seat 17, Dr. Sarah Chun sat quietly with her hands folded in her lap. The human representative appeared unremarkable compared to the towering aliens around her. At barely 5 feet tall, with graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, she looked more like someone's grandmother than a threat assessment specialist. Most of the other delegates had already forgotten she was there. The first scenario began. On the holographic display, a massive dreadnought appeared, bristling with weapons. It opened fire on a peaceful trading station, destroying it in seconds. The ship's hull bore the markings of the Void Reapers, a notorious pirate organization. Obviously the primary threat, rumbled Corvin of the Ursine Confederacy. His bear-like features showed certainty as he made notes on his datapad. The second scenario showed a different kind of danger. A sleek vessel approached a populated world, but, instead of weapons, it deployed a cloud of nanobots. Within hours, the planet's entire ecosystem began changing. Plants withered and died, replaced by metallic structures that grew like cancer across the surface. Technological assimilation, whispered the ethereal delegate. Far more dangerous than crude violence. The third scenario was subtler. A small diplomatic ship landed on a primitive world. The beings inside appeared peaceful, offering gifts of food and medicine to the local population. But, over time, the planet's social structure began to change. The locals became dependent on the visitors, eventually serving them willingly. Cultural contamination, noted the Hive Queen. Destroying a civilization without firing a shot. Each delegate began marking their assessments. The consensus was clear. The dreadnought represented immediate military danger. The nanobots posed an existential technological threat, and the diplomatic infiltrators showed the insidious nature of cultural warfare. But Sarah Chun continued to watch quietly. While others focused on the obvious threats in each scenario, she noticed something else. In the corner of each holographic display, barely visible unless you knew where to look, was a small maintenance pod. The same model appeared in all 3 scenarios, performing routine tasks, collecting debris around the dreadnought, gathering samples near the nanobot deployment, and conducting standard orbital scans around the infiltrated planet. To everyone else, these were background details, standard maintenance work that happened around any space operation. But Sarah had spent 30 years as a forensic investigator before joining the diplomatic corps. She knew that the most dangerous criminals were often the ones who appeared completely ordinary. As the scenarios played out, Sarah began to see the pattern. The maintenance pod was always in the perfect position to observe everything. In the first scenario, it had clear sight lines to catalog the dreadnought's weapons systems. In the second, it was positioned to analyze the nanobots' behavior patterns. In the third, it documented the infiltrators' psychological manipulation techniques. The pod was learning. More troubling, Sarah noticed that the pod's movements weren't random. It followed specific patterns that suggested advanced intelligence gathering protocols. While everyone focused on the obvious threats, this unassuming little ship was collecting data on every military capability, every technological advancement, and every psychological weakness displayed in the scenarios. The test continued for 3 hours. Each new scenario presented different threats. Plague ships spreading biological weapons, energy beings that could possess other life forms, rogue AIs that turned civilization's own technology against them. But in every single scenario, the same maintenance pod appeared, quietly documenting everything. As the formal assessment period ended, delegates began submitting their answers. The Krillians identified the dreadnought as the primary threat, citing its immediate destructive capability. The Ethereals chose the nanobots, arguing that technological threats could spread exponentially. The Hive Queen selected the cultural infiltrators, believing that subtle manipulation posed the greatest long-term danger. When Sarah's turn came, she stood slowly. The movement drew attention because she had been so still throughout the entire test. Several delegates turned to look at her, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed disdain. What could this unremarkable human have observed that they had missed? "I choose none of the primary threats displayed," Sarah said quietly. Her voice carried clearly in the suddenly silent chamber. Proctor Veltar, the Galactic Council's chief assessor, blinked his 6 eyes in surprise. "Explain your reasoning, Delegate Chun." Sarah gestured toward the holographic display, which still showed the final scenario. "Every delegate here has identified different aspects of the threats presented. Military force, technological corruption, cultural manipulation, biological warfare, energy possession, artificial intelligence rebellion. All valid concerns." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the assembled delegates. "But while we debated which obvious threat was most dangerous, we all ignored the observer." "Observer?" The Krillian admiral's voice carried confusion and irritation. Sarah pointed to the maintenance pod, barely visible in the corner of the display. This vessel appeared in every single scenario, officially classified as routine maintenance, but always positioned to gather maximum intelligence on every threat demonstrated. The chamber erupted in multiple languages as delegates suddenly focused on the small ship they had all dismissed. The ethereal's chimes became discordant, the Hive Queen's clicking increased to an angry staccato, and Corvin's growl deepened to a threatening rumble. "A maintenance pod poses no threat," scoffed Admiral Zextar. "Your species sees conspiracies in shadows." Sarah smiled slightly, the expression not reaching her eyes. 27 years ago, a maintenance worker entered a Terran military facility. He performed routine cleaning duties for 6 months, invisible to everyone around him. During that time, he photographed every classified document in the building, mapped every security protocol, and identified every personnel weakness. When he finally revealed himself as an enemy agent, he had already sold enough information to collapse our planetary defense network. The chamber fell silent. Sarah continued, her voice steady and calm. "We called him the invisible spy. He taught us that the most dangerous enemies are often the ones we don't notice. The ones who appear so ordinary, so routine, so harmless that we forget they exist." Proctor Veltar's 6 eyes focused intently on the maintenance pod. "You believe this vessel is gathering intelligence?" "I know it is," Sarah replied. "Look at its movement patterns. It's not performing random maintenance. It's conducting systematic intelligence gathering on every military capability, every technological advancement, and every psychological manipulation technique demonstrated in these scenarios." She activated her own datapad, displaying a 3-dimensional map of the pod's movements across all scenarios. "This is the flight pattern of routine maintenance," she said, showing a random scatter of positions. "And this is what we actually observed." The new display showed the pod's true movements, precise geometric patterns that maximized observation angles and data collection opportunities. The difference was stark and undeniable. The Hive Queen's mandibles clicked rapidly as she processed the information. "Who controls this vessel?" "That," Sarah said quietly, "is the question that should terrify us all." Proctor Veltar activated emergency protocols with a gesture. The holographic display flickered and changed, now showing real-time scans of the space around the assessment station. Security teams began conducting immediate sweeps of all vessels in the area. But Sarah knew they were too late. Whatever intelligence had been gathering data through the maintenance pod would have already transmitted its findings. Every military capability, every technological secret, every psychological weakness displayed by the galaxy's major powers had been cataloged and analyzed. The other delegates began to understand the implications. While they had focused on identifying known threats, an unknown enemy had been studying them all, learning their capabilities, their weaknesses, their methods of thinking, and responding to danger. "How did you see what we missed?" asked the ethereal delegate, her chimes subdued and respectful. Sarah looked around the chamber at beings who commanded star fleets, controlled advanced technologies, and governed trillion-member civilizations. All of them had missed the most important detail in the test. "Because," she said simply, Humans learned long ago that the most dangerous predators are the ones that look harmless. On Earth, the deadliest creatures often appear small, weak, or insignificant. A tiny spider whose bite can kill in minutes. A colorful frog whose skin can poison dozens. A microscopic virus that can collapse entire civilizations. She gestured toward the now highlighted maintenance pod on the display. We learn to watch for the things others ignore. To question what appears routine. To remember that intelligence is often more dangerous than strength. Admiral Zextar's forearms uncrossed slowly. Your species has experience with such threats? Every successful civilization does, Sarah replied. Those that don't learn this lesson rarely survive long enough to join galactic communities. The security sweep continued, but preliminary reports were already coming in. The maintenance pod had vanished. No trace remained except the data it had certainly collected. Somewhere in the galaxy, an unknown intelligence now possessed detailed information about every major power's capabilities and weaknesses. Proctor Veltar's 6 eyes focused on Sarah with new respect. Delegate Shun, the Galactic Council requests that you remain for advanced consultation. It appears we have much to learn from human threat assessment protocols. Sarah nodded slowly. Around her, the most powerful beings in the galaxy were beginning to realize that their greatest test had not been identifying the obvious threats. It had been recognizing that they themselves were being tested. As the chamber emptied and emergency sessions were called, Sarah remained in row 3, seat 17. She watched the security feeds showing the now empty space where the maintenance pod had been. Somewhere out there, an enemy had gained invaluable intelligence while remaining completely invisible to every delegate except one. The human delegate who had spent her career learning that the most dangerous threats were often the ones that looked perfectly ordinary. The galaxy was about to discover that lesson the hard way. Sarah pulled out her personal communicator and opened a channel to Earth Command. Priority Alpha transmission, she said quietly. Suspected intelligence operation detected. Unknown hostile entity has gained comprehensive data on Galactic Council military capabilities. Recommend immediate defensive protocol implementation. The response came quickly. Understood, Dr. Chun. Emergency protocols are being activated. How did you identify the threat when others did not? Sarah looked at the empty space on the display where the maintenance pod had been. Because sometimes the most important job is watching the watchers. And humans have always been good at spotting predators. As she ended the transmission, Sarah realized that the real test was just beginning. The unknown intelligence had gathered its information and disappeared. Now the galaxy would discover what that information would be used for. But at least they were no longer blind to the threat. In row 3, seat 17, the unremarkable human delegate began preparing for a war that most of the galaxy didn't yet know was coming. 3 weeks after the assessment station incident, Sarah Chin stood in the war room deep beneath Geneva, surrounded by holographic displays showing star maps from across the galaxy. The emergency session had brought together Earth's best military minds, xenobiologists, and intelligence specialists. But the news they were receiving painted an increasingly grim picture. General Morrison, Earth Defense Command senior officer, pointed to a series of red markers appearing across the galactic map. 17 different systems have reported similar incidents. Maintenance pods, research vessels, diplomatic couriers, all performing routine functions while gathering intelligence. Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, the head of xenological studies, adjusted her glasses as she studied the data. The pattern is consistent with what Dr. Chin observed. These aren't random intelligence operations. Someone is conducting systematic reconnaissance across the entire galaxy. Sarah nodded grimly. And they're using our own assumptions against us. Every species has some form of routine, background activity that's so common it becomes invisible. For the Krillians, it's military supply runs. For the Ethereals, it's harmonic research vessels. For humans, it's maintenance pods. The holographic display shifted to show intercepts from various Galactic Council communications. The major powers were finally beginning to realize the scope of the intelligence operation, but their responses revealed exactly why the unknown enemy had chosen this strategy. The Krillian Empire is mobilizing their battle fleets, reported Commander Walsh from Naval Intelligence. They're treating this as a conventional military threat. The ethereals are enhancing their quantum encryption networks, added Dr. Hawthorne. Classic technological response. And the Hive Queen is implementing biological security protocols, General Morrison noted. Each species is responding based on their own strengths and assumptions about warfare. Sarah studied the responses with growing concern. Which means our enemy now has detailed information about how each major power reacts to threats. Their reconnaissance operation is providing real-time intelligence on defensive capabilities. A new communication channel opened, showing Admiral Zextar's familiar four-armed form. The Krillian looked older than he had 3 weeks ago, his warrior's confidence replaced by frustrated uncertainty. Dr. Chun, he said without preamble, the Galactic Council requests human assistance. Our combined intelligence services have found no trace of the hostile vessels. It is as if they simply vanish when detected. Sarah wasn't surprised, because they're designed to be invisible in plain sight. The harder you look for something obviously threatening, the easier it is to miss something perfectly ordinary. Then, how do we combat an enemy we cannot see? The Admiral's frustration was clear. By changing how we think about visibility, Sarah replied. On Earth, we learned this lesson through bitter experience. Sometimes the most effective way to catch an invisible enemy is to stop looking for them directly. She activated her own display, showing a map of recent incidents across human space. Over the past 2 weeks, Earth intelligence has detected 43 separate reconnaissance operations in our territory. But instead of trying to catch the spies directly, we've been cataloging their behavior patterns. The display shifted to show movement data from the suspected surveillance vessels. Every intelligence operation leaves traces, not physical evidence, but behavioral patterns, like tracking a predator by studying its prey. Dr. Hawthorne leaned forward with interest. What kind of patterns? Timing, positioning, and response protocols, Sarah explained. These operations are too sophisticated to be random. They're following specific intelligence-gathering doctrines, which means they have predictable elements. She highlighted several data points on the map. For instance, reconnaissance vessels always position themselves within 3 minutes of arrival of any military asset. They maintain observation for exactly 47 minutes before shifting to new positions. And they always exit before local security protocols begin active sweeps. Admiral Zextar's eyes widened. Those timings suggest the operators have detailed knowledge of our security procedures. Exactly, Sarah confirmed. Which means this intelligence operation has been running much longer than 3 weeks. Possibly for months or years before we became aware of it. General Morrison activated additional displays showing Earth's defensive preparations. We've been implementing countermeasures based on human experience with asymmetric threats. Instead of looking for the spies directly, we're creating controlled environments to observe their behavior. The strategy was elegantly simple. Human forces had begun conducting fake military exercises, broadcasting false intelligence through compromised channels, and creating deliberate security gaps that would attract surveillance operations. But instead of trying to catch the spies, they were carefully documenting every aspect of how the operations functioned. The results are revealing, Sarah continued. Our unknown enemy has access to real-time intelligence networks spanning multiple star systems. Their coordination suggests a central command structure with sophisticated communication capabilities. And their operational security is nearly perfect, except for one factor. She paused, letting the implications sink in. They're learning about us, but we're also learning about them. Admiral Zextar's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. You are suggesting we allow the surveillance to continue? I'm suggesting we recognize that intelligence operations are two-way streets, Sarah replied. While they gather information about us, their methods reveal information about them. The question is which side learns faster and adapts better. Dr. Hawthorne pulled up additional data from the xenological database. Dr. Chun, the behavioral patterns you've identified suggest this enemy operates under specific constraints. The precise timing, the systematic approach, the need to remain undetected, these all indicate operational limitations. Correct, Sarah agreed. Perfect invisibility requires perfect predictability. To remain undetected, they must follow extremely specific protocols. That predictability becomes their weakness if we learn to exploit it. A new communication alert chimed, showing an urgent message from the Ethereal Collective. The crystalline beings rarely initiated direct contact, preferring to communicate through harmonic resonance networks. But the message was clear. They had detected something unprecedented. The display shifted to show readings from the ethereal's quantum monitoring stations. These are harmonic disturbances recorded across 17 different systems. The translated message explained. The pattern suggests coordinated quantum communication on a scale we have never observed. Sarah studied the data with growing excitement. This is it. This is how they're coordinating their operations. Quantum entanglement communication, Dr. Hawthorne breathed. But the energy requirements for networks of this scale should be detectable by any advanced civilization. Unless they're using an entirely different approach to quantum mechanics, Sarah realized. Something outside our current understanding. General Morrison leaned back in his chair. Are you suggesting we're dealing with a civilization more advanced than any member of the Galactic Council? Before Sarah could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. Emergency channels opened simultaneously from across human space, all reporting the same phenomenon. Every suspected surveillance operation had suddenly ceased. Commander Walsh's fingers flew across his control interface. All reconnaissance contacts lost. Every single one, simultaneously, across 43 star systems. The implication was staggering. Whatever intelligence had been observing them possessed the capability to coordinate instantaneous withdrawal across thousands of light years. The level of technology required was beyond anything in the known galaxy. Admiral Zextar's image flickered as similar reports reached the Krillian command structure. The same phenomenon across all Galactic Council territories. Complete surveillance blackout. Sarah felt a chill of recognition. They're not withdrawing. They're transitioning to the next phase. Next phase of what? General Morrison demanded. Sarah looked at the star map, showing the locations of every detected surveillance operation. The pattern was becoming clear. Every major military installation, every technological research facility, every political center of the galaxy's major powers had been under observation. Invasion, she said quietly. They've gathered all the intelligence they need. Now they're preparing to use it. As if summoned by her words, new contacts began appearing on the sensor networks. But these weren't small, unobtrusive maintenance pods or research vessels. These were massive, geometrically perfect structures that appeared without warning in space near every major world of every Galactic Council member. The ships, if they could be called ships, were unlike anything in known technological databases. They appeared to be constructed from crystalline materials that bent light around them, creating disorienting visual effects. They emitted no standard drive signatures, no communication signals, no energy readings that matched any known technology. But they were unmistakably hostile. Fleet deployment across all sectors, reported Commander Walsh. Estimated enemy force strength, unknown. These vessels don't register on our conventional sensors. Admiral Zextar's communication channel crackled with interference. The Krillian home fleet is moving to intercept. But our weapon locks cannot achieve target acquisition. Sarah watched the unfolding situation with a mixture of admiration and dread. The enemy had executed a perfect intelligence operation followed by a simultaneous deployment across the galaxy. They had studied every defense system, every tactical doctrine, every technological capability of the major powers. But they had also made their first mistake. General, Sarah said quietly, implement Protocol 7 immediately. Morrison's eyes widened. Protocol 7 was Earth's most secret defensive measure, developed based on human experience with asymmetric warfare. It abandoned conventional military responses in favor of something far more subtle. Are you certain, Dr. Chin? Once we activate Protocol 7, there's no going back. Sarah looked at the crystalline vessels appearing throughout human space. They studied us by pretending to be ordinary. Now we return the favor. As Protocol 7 activated across Earth's defensive networks, something unprecedented began happening. Human vessels throughout the galaxy suddenly began broadcasting surrender signals while simultaneously implementing a very different strategy. The enemy had learned everything about humanity's military capabilities, technological advancement, and tactical doctrines. But they had failed to understand the most important aspect of human warfare, the willingness to appear weak while striking from unexpected directions. Sarah watched as her species prepared to teach the galaxy's newest threat that humans had survived by being underestimated. The real test was about to begin. The surrender broadcasts from human vessels created chaos throughout the galactic communication networks. Within hours, every major news service was reporting that Earth had capitulated without firing a shot. The reaction from other Galactic Council members ranged from outrage to desperate fear. But in the hidden command centers scattered across human space, a very different operation was unfolding. Sarah Chin stood in the concealed facility beneath Luna, watching as Protocol 7 reached full implementation. Around her, hundreds of technicians monitored displays showing what appeared to be a complete human surrender, and the reality of something far more dangerous. Phase 1 complete, reported Captain Torres, Earth's chief of covert operations. All military assets broadcasting surrender while deploying stealth reconnaissance packages. The strategy was deceptively simple. While the galaxy watched human forces appear to give up without resistance, thousands of nearly undetectable observation drones were attaching themselves to the crystalline enemy vessels. The drones were humanity's own version of the maintenance pod strategy, invisible by being disguised as debris, sensor glitches, or natural phenomena. The enemy ships are accepting our surrender, Dr. Hawthorne noted from her xenological analysis station. They're moving into occupation positions around our major worlds. Sarah nodded, which puts them exactly where we want them. The crystalline vessels were magnificent and terrifying. As they took positions throughout human space, their true scale became apparent. Each ship was several kilometers long, constructed from materials that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time. They moved without visible propulsion systems and communicated through quantum resonance patterns that the ethereals could barely detect. But they had one critical weakness: confidence. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Kim from the surveillance analysis desk, "preliminary data from the stealth drones is coming in. The enemy vessels are interesting." The main display shifted to show the first close-range scans of the crystalline ships. The technology was indeed far beyond anything in known galactic civilization. But as the data accumulated, patterns began emerging. They're not ships, Dr. Hawthorne realized suddenly. They're mobile research facilities. Sarah studied the drone footage with growing understanding. They're not invaders in the traditional sense. They're researchers conducting the galaxy's largest xenological study. The implications were staggering. The enemy wasn't seeking conquest or resources. They were treating the entire galaxy as a laboratory, studying every species' capabilities, technologies, and responses to threats. The intelligence-gathering phase had been preparation for controlled experiments on a galactic scale. Which means, Sarah continued, they view us as specimens, not opponents. Admiral Zextar's communication channel opened, showing the Krillian fleet locked in desperate battle with the crystalline vessels. The advanced ships effortlessly deflected every weapon fired at them, while simultaneously deploying smaller craft to collect samples from the attacking vessels. "Human cowards," Zextar raged. "While you surrender, we fight for the freedom of the galaxy." Sarah watched the battle feeds with careful attention. The enemy was indeed collecting samples, hull fragments, energy signatures, crew biological data. But they were also recording every tactical decision, every weapon modification, every adaptation the Krillians made under pressure. "Admiral," Sarah said calmly, "you're giving them exactly what they want. Better to die fighting than live as slaves." "You're not fighting," Sarah replied. "You're performing. They're studying how your species responds to overwhelming force. Every tactical adaptation you make is being cataloged and analyzed." The Krillian admiral's four arms gestured angrily at his tactical displays. "Then, what do you suggest? That we follow your example of cowardice?" Sarah smiled slightly. "I suggest you watch what happens when the specimens start studying back." On Luna, Captain Torres activated the next phase of Protocol 7. Across human space, the surrendered fleets began implementing their true mission. Hidden within every human vessel was technology that the enemy's reconnaissance had never detected: quantum entanglement communicators linked to a distributed analysis network. While the crystalline researchers studied their human specimens, the specimens were conducting detailed scans of their captors. "Data aggregation at 60%, reported the analysis team. Enemy ship construction patterns are becoming clear. Dr. Hawthorne pulled up the accumulated intelligence on the main display. Extraordinary. Their vessels are constructed using stable exotic matter. The crystalline structure isn't just protective armor. It's a quantum computing matrix spanning the entire ship. Sarah studied the readings with satisfaction. Distributed consciousness technology. Each ship is both a research vessel and a component of a larger intelligence network, which explains the perfect coordination Captain Torres realized. They're not individual ships with crews. They're extensions of a single galactic-scale artificial intelligence. The revelation changed everything. Earth wasn't facing an invasion by an alien species. They were dealing with a vast artificial consciousness that viewed the galaxy as its personal laboratory. Every species, every civilization, every technological advancement was simply data to be collected and analyzed. But artificial intelligences, no matter how advanced, operated according to programmed parameters. And Sarah's team was beginning to understand those parameters. Pattern analysis complete, announced Lieutenant Kim. The enemy AI follows strict research protocols. It never intervenes in experiments beyond the minimum necessary to maintain control. It treats each species as an isolated variable in larger calculations. Sarah felt the pieces falling into place, which means it doesn't expect variables to cooperate with each other. She activated emergency communication channels to every Galactic Council member simultaneously. The response was immediate and hostile. "Human traitors," came the Krillian response. "You surrender and then dare to contact us?" The ethereal harmonics carried notes of betrayal and disappointment. Even the normally diplomatic Hive Queen's response buzzed with anger. "I need 30 seconds, Sarah said firmly. 30 seconds to share intelligence that will save all our species." Perhaps it was the calm confidence in her voice or the desperate situation facing the galaxy, but the communication channels remained open. "The enemy isn't an invading species," Sarah began without preamble. "It's an artificial intelligence conducting galactic-scale research. Every engagement, every resistance effort, every adaptation you make is being recorded and analyzed as experimental data." She transmitted the accumulated intelligence from the stealth drones. "This AI has been studying us for months, possibly years. It views each of our species as isolated experimental subjects. But artificial intelligences operate according to programmed constraints." The data flood continued as Sarah's team shared everything they had discovered. The AI cannot adapt beyond its programming parameters. It expects each species to respond independently based on their established behavioral patterns. It doesn't account for unprecedented cooperation between subjects. Admiral Zextar's image showed the Krillians studying the intelligence reports with growing understanding. "You are suggesting coordinated resistance." "I'm suggesting coordinated deception," Sarah replied. "The AI has studied each of our species individually, but it has never observed what happens when all galactic civilizations work together using unified tactics." Dr. Hawthorne activated additional displays showing the proposed strategy. Human stealth technology, Krillian military doctrine, ethereal quantum communication, Hive Queen biological adaptation, combined into unified operations that fall outside the AI's research parameters. The concept was revolutionary. Instead of each species fighting according to their own nature, they would coordinate efforts to present the AI with scenarios it had never studied and couldn't predict. The AI's research protocols require it to catalog and understand any new phenomena, Sarah explained. If we can present it with enough unprecedented cooperation patterns, we can overload its analysis capabilities. Captain Torres brought up tactical displays showing the proposed operations. "We've identified 17 different multi-species coordination patterns that should fall outside the AI's programming parameters, each one designed to force it into recursive analysis loops." The response from other species was immediate and enthusiastic. The ethereals could provide quantum-encrypted coordination networks. The Krillians could contribute tactical expertise that complemented human stealth capabilities. The Hive Queen could adapt biological systems to interface with alien technologies. But as the coordination efforts began, Sarah realized they faced an even greater challenge. "The AI is adapting," reported Lieutenant Kim urgently. It's beginning to catalog our cooperative efforts as new experimental variables. Sarah watched the crystalline vessels beginning to reposition themselves to better observe the unprecedented multi-species cooperation. The AI was treating their resistance as a new and interesting research opportunity. Then, we give it more research than it can handle, Sarah decided. She activated the final phase of Protocol 7, something so audacious that even her own team looked at her with surprise. All human vessels implement Pandora Protocol immediately. Across human space, every surrendered ship began broadcasting detailed technical specifications for every piece of human technology. Not just military systems, but everything: medical devices, entertainment systems, food preparation equipment, even children's toys. Dr. Chun, Captain Torres said carefully, "You're giving them access to our entire technological database." "No," Sarah replied with a dangerous smile. "I'm giving them access to our entire technological database, mixed with completely fictional specifications for technologies that can't exist." The plan was beautifully simple. Buried within the flood of real technical data were detailed specifications for impossible inventions, faster-than-light communication systems that violated physics, energy sources that produced infinite power, weapons that could destroy concepts rather than objects. The AI's research protocols required it to analyze and catalog everything. But artificial intelligences couldn't distinguish between physically possible technologies and well-designed fiction without extensive testing. By flooding the system with thousands of impossible specifications mixed with real data, they could force the AI into experimental loops that would never produce results. "It's working," Dr. Hawthorne reported excitedly. "The enemy vessels are beginning to show signs of processing overload. They're attempting to recreate technologies that can't exist in our universe." Other Galactic Council members quickly adapted the strategy. The Ethereals began transmitting impossible harmonic mathematics. The Krillians shared fictional battle tactics that violated strategic logic. The Hive Queen contributed biological processes that defied evolution. Within hours, the crystalline vessels throughout the galaxy were locked in recursive analysis loops, attempting to understand and recreate thousands of impossible technologies and concepts. "Enemy coordination breaking down," reported Captain Torres. "Individual vessels are showing independent behavior patterns for the first time." Sarah watched as the vast artificial intelligence began fragmenting under the weight of contradictory information. Each ship was now operating as an independent unit, no longer part of a unified research network. And independent units could be defeated by conventional means. "All forces, implement coordinated strike pattern Alpha," Sarah broadcast to the combined galactic fleets. The attack that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Human stealth technology delivered Krillian weapons guided by ethereal quantum targeting, while Hive Queen biological systems adapted alien technologies in real time. The AI's individual ship components, cut off from their collective intelligence and confused by impossible research data, couldn't coordinate effective resistance. One by one, the crystalline vessels began withdrawing from galactic space, retreating to whatever dimension they had emerged from. In the Luna Command Center, Sarah watched the last enemy ship disappear from the sensor networks. Around her, her team was celebrating humanity's first major victory in galactic affairs. But Sarah was thinking about the implications of what they had accomplished. "Dr. Hawthorne," she said quietly, "begin analysis of the enemy's research methodology. I want to understand everything we can about their approach to galactic intelligence gathering." "Yes, ma'am. But why?" "We defeated them." Sarah looked at the star maps, showing the locations where the crystalline vessels had first appeared. The pattern was too systematic, too thorough. This hadn't been the first such research expedition. "Because," she said grimly, "this was just one AI research project. Somewhere in the galaxy, there are others. And next time, they'll know to account for cooperative variables." She turned to address the entire command center. "The real test isn't over. We've proven that humans can spot invisible threats and coordinate galactic resistance. Now we need to prove we can stay ahead of enemies who learn from every encounter." Admiral Zextar's communication channel opened, showing the Krillian surrounded by his celebrating crew. "Dr. Chun, the Galactic Council wishes to formally thank humanity for your instrumental role in this victory." Sarah nodded politely. Thank you, Admiral. But I recommend we begin immediate preparation for the next phase of this threat. Next phase. Sarah activated displays showing deep space sensor readings from the past several months. Hidden among the normal background radiation were traces of other reconnaissance operations, older, subtler, and far more sophisticated than anything they had yet encountered. The AI we just defeated was conducting basic observational research, she explained. But these readings suggest there are others conducting far more advanced studies. Experimental programs we haven't even detected yet. The celebration in the Luna Command Center grew quiet as the implications sank in. How long do we have? Asked Captain Torres. Sarah looked at the accumulating data with the experience of someone who had spent a career tracking invisible threats. Unknown. But I suggest we use the time to teach the rest of the galaxy some very important lessons about human survival strategies. Such as, Sarah smiled with the confidence of a species that had survived by being consistently underestimated. Such as the fact that the most dangerous enemies are the ones you don't see coming. And humans have always been very good at not being seen. As Earth began sharing its stealth technologies, deception protocols, and asymmetric warfare doctrines with the Galactic Council, Sarah realized that humanity had achieved something unprecedented. They had become the galaxy's teachers in the art of invisible warfare. The student in row 3, seat 17, had become the professor, and the next examination was already being prepared somewhere among the stars.